I asked Chat GPT to recommend the best Grateful Dead songs to listen to. And then I compared it to the recommendations from my users in the chat. So specifically, I asked, what are the most important Dead songs to listen to? And ChatGPT said, great question. Getting into the Grateful Dead can feel overwhelming since their legacy spans decades, countless live shows, and many stylistic changes. But certain songs are central to their identity, both musically and culturally. Here's a list of essential Grateful Dead songs, including both studio versions and must-hear live staples. Top studio songs, easier entry points. These offer a more accessible way into the Dead sound. 1. Ripple, from American Beauty 1970. A gentle, philosophical folk tune with beautiful acoustic arrangements. 2. Box of Rain, American Beauty. Written by Phil Lesh for his dying father, it's poetic and emotionally resonant. 3. Friend of the Devil, from American Beauty. A fast-paced storytelling folk song with a dark edge. 4. Trucking, from American Beauty. Their semi-autobiographical road song includes the iconic line, "What a long, strange trip it's been." Number 5, Uncle John's Band, Working Man's Dead, 1970. Harmonies, community spirit, and a philosophical core. Before I go on to ChatGPT's live recommendations, could you guys comment on whether you agree with these ChatGPT recommendations or whether these are wrong? Okay, I'm curious about how reality compares to ChatGPT and if it's right or wrong or whatever. Okay, so then it says live essentials, the true Grateful Dead experience. The Dead are all about live improvisation. These songs evolved constantly on stage. So number 1 was Dark Star. Now, by the way, the ultimate first listen to versions from Live Dead 1969. I believe that's the one I heard, by the way, the 1969. 2, the other one, a swirling, intense psychedelic jam, often paired with cryptical envelopment. Good word. Number 3, China Cat Sunflower to I Know You Writer. This is the one you guys recommended, so I have heard this one. 4, Scarlet Begonias to Fire on the Mountain, a classic second set combo known for joyful exploratory jams. Number 5, Playing in the Band. Starts as a catchy tune, then blasts into improvisational space. 6, Eyes of the World. Jazz influenced, bright and hopeful, a fan favorite from the Wake of the Flood era. Number 7, St. Stephen. Psychedelic and poetic, core to their chat sounds. See the live Dead version. Number 8, Terrapin Station. A mystic, ambitious suite with lush studio production and a beloved jam platform in live shows. Yeah, I'm confused by that because this is supposed to be the live recommendation and then it's mentioning the studio production one and then it's also being like, oh, but it also has a jam and live shows. Okay, then fan favorite ballads. These show the emotional and lyrical depth of the Dead. Wharf Rat. I feel like someone recommended that to me. Redemption ballad with dramatic live builds. Broke Down Palace. A touching farewell, often used to close shows. Morning Dew. A post-apocalyptic ballad with emotional intensity. Stella Blue. A hauntingly beautiful reflection on failure and artistry. And then it said, would you like a playlist link or recommendations tailored to a specific vibe? I wrote, can you compare your recommendations to the recommendations from comments on my YouTube videos? Paste it here. And then I just pasted a whole bunch of comments. This is not all of the comments. But they said, relevant Grateful Dead reference from your comments. Been listening to this song for over 50 years and still get touched when Jerry sings. Emotional singing applies to songs like Ripple, Stella Blue, and Morning Dew. And these are, again, the emotional angle. And then right now, your commenters are more Phish focused, discussing Mike's songs, suites, Harry Hood, and set lists. But one clear path into the Dead for your community might be through comparing Dead's live improvisations with Phish, focusing on emotional ballads by Jerry to contrast with Phish's quirkier or funkier vibe, building from China Rider to Scarlet Fire and Eyes of the World, jammy, emotional, melodic. Would you like help creating a Grateful Dead listening journey that would resonate well with both you and your Phish-loving audience? I can tailor it around, let's say yes. And let's see what it says. Okay, since your audience is Phish savvy and you're already digging into the Grateful Dead, let's build a Grateful Dead listening journey that highlights what makes them distinct yet complementary to Phish, showcases Jerry's emotional vocal power, taps into the improvisation and live energy your audience appreciates, offers clear entry points with escalating depth. Okay, wow, here's a lot. Phase 1, emotional core, Jerry, ballads, and sing-alongs. Again, they go back to Ripple, Broke Down Palace, Stella Blue, Box of Rain. Do a side-by-side with Phish ballads, Dirt or Fast Enough for You, and reflect on lyricism and emotional tone. It sounds like a lot of work. Phase 2, first taste of jam, structured yet expansive. Transition to how the Dead jammed with intent and melody, similar to Phish's composed jam hybrids like Reba or Hood. Scarlet Begonias, Fire in the Mountain, Eyes of the World, jazzy, bright, and endlessly improvisable. Here, the 6/1874 version. Oh, that's cool. Break down how their jams evolve. Tempo, key shifts, tension release. Phish jams will eat that up. Phase 3, deep improvisation, the head trip. Now dive into where the dead really live, the abstract, open-minded jamming space. This will resonate with fans of Tweezer, Piper, or Split Open and Melt. Jam song, Dark Star, the sacred text of psychedelic improv. The other one, furious energy, wild rhythmic playing, see the 1972 versions. Playing in the band. Often 20 plus minutes live, starts normal, ends in a space jam. Terrapin Station Suite, the most majestic dead composition, mytho-poetic dramatic. Analyze how the band listens, reacts in the moment. Conversational jamming like Phish but looser. Thematic journeys, build a slow arc. Introduce full set experiences that showcase the dead skill at constructing journeys like Phish does with the perfect show flow. 5/8/77, Cornell, Ithaca. Legendary set, great sound, emotional, funky, tight. Actually, someone else told me, you guys actually said Cornell 77 in the chat. So, good job. You're smarter than Chat GPT. 2/13/70, Fillmore East. Dark Star, the other one, Love Light equals Madness. Europe 72 tour, clean soundboard recordings, classic versions of everything. You guys always recommend Europe 72, by the way. So ChatGPT must be listening. Invite fans to setlist react with you. Pause between songs and explain transitions of mood. I can do that. I already do that. Okay, compare themes with Phish. Storytellers, Americana roots, archetypes. Tricksters, surreal readers, music absurdism. Jerry equals the heart, emotional. Trey equals the brain, theory and technique. Improvisation equals organic freeform. Improvisation equals mathematical modular. Culture, spiritual hippie commune. Culture, geeky, playful, irreverent. Okay, those seem very reasonable. What do you guys think? I think this is good. I don't know if I necessarily need to compare them though. Like I kind of like Phish for what it is, and I like the Grateful Dead for what it is. I do think though I resonate more with the Phish, like everything here, the brain, nerdiness, like intellectual, mathematical, this all geeky, playful, music absurdism. That's all stuff I really like, and I think what's hard for me about the Dead is that one, I did not live through the 60s or the 70s. I was born in 85, so I pretty much missed the 80s too, because I didn't become into consciousness until around 1990 when I was 5, right? And then didn't really become a real thinking human until it was already the late 90s. Because I feel like when you're 12, you kind of start to really become a person. So then it's already like 1997, 1998. So I really missed a lot of important decades. So here where it says like Americana roots and archetypes, and Jerry, the heart, emotional, organic, freeform, spiritual, hippie commune. A lot of that's very, I don't know. I think I'm a very emotional person, and I have a really high empathy. So that's why when I listen to the sad thing, like "You're gonna miss me when I'm gone" thing, and I started crying, it was like genuine. It's like when I heard Billy Strings, it was called "Gild the Lily." And I just start crying and like I have to pause. Like music does really touch me on an emotional level like that. It is hard for me to understand the hippie part of it. And I think it's also a little bit of Eastern spirituality I'm not so comfortable with. I'm very comfortable with like Western spirituality, like Judeo-Christian beliefs. Like I think that's very comfortable for me. I'm a less comfortable with kind of like Eastern thought and spirituality. I just don't know enough about it, and I find it very scary, I guess. So I don't know if that's a prerequisite. And then also, people keep talking about LSD and psychedelics, and that's not something I've ever done or ever had interest in. I'm also one of the things that's always really bothered me and really makes me cry in general is I really hate how addiction afflicts families. Like, I really hate how alcoholism, drug addiction has afflicted America, how it's afflicted families. Um, because I think it's one thing if someone makes a personal choice to use something and it has no impact on any other person, I really don't have a problem with that. Like, I don't have a problem if an adult, because I'm kind of libertarian in that way. Like, I don't really think drugs should be so illegal or anything like that. But I have a problem when people do things selfishly when there are other people who love them and it impacts them. So when alcoholics choose to drink and when they drink, they're kind of not nice people and they kind of are neglectful. And this goes both ways to their husbands or their wives or to their children or to their parents. I always have a problem with that. So it's hard for me to separate this idea of conscious and responsible use for the purpose of enlightenment versus people who get into addictions. And of course, we have painkillers, and we have obviously a lot of that was the pharmaceutical industry. But then we have the fentanyl crisis, and we've had so many overdoses in this country. And I've read so many articles. It's just something I'm really interested in. And maybe it's because I'm from Redding, California, where there's just a lot of methamphetamine use and a lot of drug people who kind of just are homeless and roam around and were scary in the park when I was growing up. And then, of course, I live near San Francisco where you can see legalized drug addiction where it's not considered a addiction, it's considered a disease. And then the idea is, why should we penalize people for having a disease? And so then they actually provide them the drugs, state funded or city funded. I'm not sure who exactly pays, but drugs are given out to people. So they're like shooting up in the street legally. They don't get arrested. They can like drop their needles in the street. They are just defecating in the streets. And I don't know if that's a good idea. And of course, methamphetamine can create really violent people. Violent behavior, I guess is better to say. So yeah, I'm kind of frightened of this whole psychedelic world. I know that now there's therapeutic ketamine and all that, like microdosing things under the care of a therapist, and that can really help with trauma and different therapy. So I know that this is a field that is expanding, and of course I've heard about how LSD has these amazing effects and stuff, and it's so great. And maybe it's not addictive in the way these other drugs are, but it's really hard to separate it all out. And I don't know. I just see a lot of affliction in America caused by substances. And so it's hard for me to say, like, oh, this would be good for everybody. Because also, not all drugs are good for everybody. Like, I know people personally that even marijuana for them created psychosis. And there are lots of studies. Like, no, literally, like, I'm going to ask Chat GPT about it. Is there a link between bipolar mania and marijuana use? Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. So there's a well-established but complex link between bipolar disorder and marijuana use. Marijuana use can trigger or worsen manic episodes in people with bipolar disorder. It's more associated with increased manic symptoms than depressive ones. People with bipolar disorder are more likely to use cannabis, often to self-medicate. Chronic use may worsen the course of the illness. More frequent mood episodes, hospitalizations. Yeah, so this is what I've read in a lot of studies, and I've seen it happen to people personally that I knew. So it's hard for me, even with marijuana. It's legal. It's completely legal in California where I live, and I've done it before, but I don't like it. I don't do it. So it's just not something I enjoy. I feel very out of control. I'd feel like lazy. Like, I don't know. I like to be really productive and do stuff all the time. And maybe people would argue, like, no, it's good to turn your brain off and just relax and whatever. But I don't know. So I think that's part of it is that I'm basically listening to this band, the Grateful Dead, that was so part of this movement when Grateful Dead was, the psychedelic LSD was coming out. all I also know about LSD is that, again, I'm a very knowledgeable about the musical Hair, and there's literally a song that's all initials. It's called Initials, and it's like LBJ took the IRT down to 4th Street, USA. When he got there, what did he see? The youth of America on LSD. LSD. It's one of my favorite songs from Hair. But then, of course, there's a song from Hair that's just about drugs. It's called Hashish, Cocaine. It just lists like every substance ever. So that I know about. What is the link between the Grateful Dead and psychedelics? The Grateful Dead and psychedelics are deeply intertwined, not just casually, but culturally, musically, historically, and even philosophically. Understanding this connection helps explain both the band's unique sound and their devoted subculture. Here's a breakdown. Okay, so here's a big deal, guys. Like, me coming from, I also want you to know, when you're a millennial, we were raised in an era where we had this thing called DARE, and it was an anti-drug thing in our schools. So we were basically indoctrinated with two things growing up. And it was that drugs will ruin your life, and that two, if you smoke cigarettes, you are literally a bad person. So that's why millennials don't smoke cigarettes for the most part, but you'll see Gen Z, they're very into vaping nicotine. So most Gen Zs are walking around with a vape, and they're just vaping all the time. Millennials were like, I would never touch nicotine, okay? And it's just like the culture we were raised in. So you have to understand, from my cultural lens, who was told my whole life that like drugs are bad, they will ruin your life. And like I've said, what did I see? The opioid crisis in the Midwest and ruined middle America, and the collapse of the middle class, and the squalor honestly affecting a lot of white Americans. Maybe even some, these like not native, but like people who've been here for many, many generations and who live in the Midwest are some of the most afflicted by the drug addiction crisis in America, right? So obviously it afflicts everybody, but whenever I read those articles about like Ohio and like Michigan and all these children who are being raised by their grandparents because their parents died of overdoses and stuff like that, or they're in jail, or they're junkies, or they're on the street somewhere and no one knows where they are. So that was a big part of my whole coming to be. So it's hard for me to imagine a world where it's like, I'm just gonna take LSD and write a song. Like it just so far outside of my wheelhouse that it's hard for me to grasp if that makes sense. So look, this says the Grateful Dead emerged from the 1960s San Francisco scene, particularly around Ken Kesey's acid tests. Wild LSD-fueled happenings where the band, then called the Warlocks, played improvised music to accompany people's trips. They were the house band for the acid tests, which were proto-raves organized by the Merry Pranksters, a group of LSD evangelists. LSD wasn't just in the room, it was the point of the event. The Dead learned to play music with the trip, not just through it. Music built for psychedelic experience. Their sound evolved to reflect the experience of tripping. Long, freeform jams that mimic the rising and falling waves of an LSD or psilocybin trip. Use of space, silence, and texture, especially in songs like Dark Star, The Other One, and Playing in the Band. Lyrics, especially by Robert Hunter, reference cosmic ideas, ego death, time distortion, and mystical imagery, all common in psychedelic experiences. Examples: Dark Star crashes, pouring its light into ashes. Searchlight, casting for fault in the cloud of delusion, from Terrapin Station. Live shows as psychedelic rituals. Dead shows became communal, improvisational, open-ended psychedelic environments. Fans tripped in parking lots, campgrounds, and inside the venue. The band's unpredictability and spontaneity mirrored the non-linear logic of a trip. The space segment of second sets post-1970s was often an abstract soundscape designed to be completely unmoored from structure. Psychedelics shaped their philosophy. Jerry Garcia said the Dead weren't just a band, they were about creating shared experience. Psychedelics emphasized ego dissolution, group unity, and timelessness, which informed the Dead's commitment to collaboration, improvisation, and anti-commercialism. The band was skeptical of fame and hierarchy, values reinforced by psychedelic experiences of interconnectedness. Okay, that makes sense. And I think it's a beautiful idea that everyone is connected at a deep level. And I do feel that about the world, by the way, that like we're all kind of one part of one soul, and we kind of have this like collective feeling, and it's maybe masked because our physical world, we see all these different people and we see different cultures and we see different countries and nationalities, and it's more like that's all our created separateness, but we really are from one creator and we're all pieces of the same God. I mean, that's kind of how I believe in the world in general, that we're all children of God, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, the universe. What maybe that God is people, whatever. The point is, we are all part of one collective experience, and if we just learn to love each other, then so I already feel that way. So I don't need psychedelics to experience that because I've already felt that. I want you guys to know that I've had these really religious, spiritual, I don't know what to call them, experiences, like out of world experiences. And for me, they're usually from performing, singing. Because when I'm singing and I'm actually in it and I'm not thinking about anything else and I'm completely in that character or I'm completely in that moment, and these feelings of, wow, this is spirituality, this is God, like this is the gift I was brought in this world to do, if that makes sense. So like that happened before. I had ones that were very like straightforward and you would be like, oh, of course you had that experience. Like my choir sang in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, and we sang a song called Tu es Petrus, which was written by Palestrina, who was a composer for the Vatican. And so he wrote those words, and in fact, they're inscribed. They were inscribed on the top of St. Peter's Basilica in like around the circular roof thing on the inside, said Tu es Petrus, and the whole line of what we sang in that song. And I'm telling you that with all the voices together, the polyphony and the harmony of double choral, 8-part harmony, 20 people. There's nothing like that, okay? And when everything and all the voices align, it's like this perfect, amazing genesis of everything. And it like represents, I think, what they're trying to show us. So I experienced that then. I also sang, there's at the American Choral Directors Association, while I was in college, I was in the chamber choir under the direction of William Denning, who was a very world-renowned choir conductor, and it was amazing to be, he's no longer with us, but he was amazing, controversial figure, but really amazing choral director. And we sang a Bach cantata, I think it's a cantata, it was a Bach double choral 3-part song called Sing It Dem Hen. It's like sing to the heavens, sing it, sing. And it was this amazing thing with like some, like a string quartet, I think, accompanying us. And it was just one of these epic things. It's one of the pieces that's like the hardest in choral music to perform. And so to do that with this amazing double choir, it was also epic experience. Can't explain it, otherworldly. And then of course, just singing on stage, opera specifically, you just feel kind of transported. So I guess I get that experience already, is what I'm trying to say. It's just when I'm doing that, I feel the most connected to my purpose and what I'm meant to be doing. And I also feel it from one other thing, which is I get to do every day, and that's teaching voice. When I teach singing to students, because that's what I do for a living, I teach from 7 years old to adults. Sometimes I'm just in kind of like they're singing, I'm correcting them, we're kind of in this fusion, they're doing something, I make a suggestion, they implement the suggestion, I go deeper, we get there, and through this like process of working together and me bringing to them this knowledge that I've amassed from all of the teachers before me, from generations and generations of vocal pedagogists and opera singers and music theorists and composers, that all was passed to me in music school and just from my life and having classical music in my household and regular music and rock music and everything. And I'm passing on this knowledge, and it's almost like it's coming to me, it's a combination of like intellectual but also like spiritual, and I'm like passing this on in the moment. And in that moment, sometimes I feel also really connected with the creator and with people, whatever you want to call that. So yeah, I do understand. I just want you to know. And so for some people, if the Grateful Dead is how they feel that feeling, and if for some people, if it's only from psychedelics that they feel that feeling, I also understand. But I just want you to know, when you're coming from my generation, where we saw mostly the affliction of drug use, it's hard for me to celebrate it and feel comfortable with it, because of course there were also heroin. I also know about the heroin overdoses from that era, right? So and some of these people used both. So it's hard for me to separate all this, right? So, and a lot of great rock stars died of drug overdoses, right? So that's just my general hesitation towards the whole thing. But it's just, I did watch the show The Wonder Years. Sometimes you guys are like writing about like, do you know about the moon landing and then this and that? I'm like, yes, because I watched The Wonder Years, and my parents were born in like 1956, 1957, and so they are boomers, younger boomers. So they were too young to be hippies, and they always told me that since they were little, because they always loved some hippie stuff. And of course, we loved the musical Hair, and they're like, oh, we were too young, because they were still in middle school. They graduated high school in 74. So they were just too young when it was like 1968 and all that stuff was happening. They were still kids, So it's like they saw it happening, and maybe some of or their friends, older siblings and stuff like that went off to San Francisco and New York and all that. But they did not, right? So they've always been hippie adjacent, but never hippies themselves. So they were too young. So again, I'm just one generation, but I have plenty of friends who their parents were on the older side of the baby boomers, and their parents were hippies, like they were old enough to be in the summer of love and go to San Francisco and do all that stuff. And that's what I learned from the musical Hair, is just kind of that experience. Not saying, how accurate could any of one movie be, right, to the experience that so many people went through. But yeah, that's the thing, is like I wasn't there, and I grew up in a very different time. And maybe it was necessary in the 60s and 70s that so many of these establishment things were broken down, because you guys were going from like a monoculture of like, this is the way, and and then the hippies were like, we're going to go counterculture, right? But I was raised in a time post counterculture, and so many things broke down. And now I guess you guys have seen what happens when everything breaks down, right? Like we've been in like the post, now we're in a point where it's like women are purposely becoming trad wives because they want to go back to the traditional ways, because maybe they don't agree with the ways that feminism, what feminism sold them, right? So we're kind of we're in a world now where you can kind of do anything. And now you can, there's no stigma in America, I think, for being gay or lesbian at all. There's, obviously there's people talk about trans rights, and I don't want to get political and stuff like that, but there's still marginalized groups, obviously, but it's so much different than it was in the 60s and 70s. So it's really hard to understand that, like to put myself back in that time and be like, wow, this must have been groundbreaking, right? So this is why I read all this. So then to finish this, influence on the Deadhead culture. Deadheads often saw the band as part of a spiritual or transformative journey, not just entertainment. The community itself reflected psychedelic ideals: communal living, free expression, experimentation, transcendence. Shakedown Street, the vending area at shows, is a modern-day echo of the 60s psychedelic bazaar. That's kind of cool, They show that in Hair, the musical. Like just people selling random stuff and like living and traveling in their car, and it's kind of cool. Not just drugs. It's worth noting, psychedelics were a tool, not the end goal. The Dead were serious about musicianship and authenticity. LSD may have opened doors, but they kept playing with or without it. And then, summary, for psychedelics, nonlinear perception of time, dissolution of ego and structure, visionary mythic thinking, LSD experimentation and art fusion, psychedelic ideals, and freedom. So you see kind of it goes across jam-based music, nonlinear. Improvisation, dissolution of ego and structure. Lyrical mysticism, visionary mythic thinking, acid test, LSD experimentation and art fusion, Deadhead community, psychedelic ideal of freedom and unity. Now, I talked about before the dissolution of ego and structure. We already had a lot of this in, like I've mentioned in a different video, the breakdown of the tonal system in the turn to the 20th century, with composers pushing the limits like Stravinsky and Schoenberg and others. That was something I already studied, and so it doesn't shock me, I guess. And maybe people at the time who were only listening to like regular old rock and roll that has the chord progression of 1 4 5 1 or something, they were like, oh my god, this is so crazy, it's pushing the limits. But music had already been pushed pretty far by 1960s, okay? Like if you actually go through classical music and then you listen to all the stuff from the turn of the century, and then the crazy stuff written post World War One, and then again post World War Two, and just how much those wars impacted classical music, you get a lot of interesting stuff that's quite wild, in my opinion, like just really pushes boundaries. And so it's like, yes, the Grateful Dead pushed boundaries, but that they weren't the first to do it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so maybe I think they just were a perfect alignment with being in the right place at the right time, like being in San Francisco near this LSD house thing, whatever. I don't know much about that actually, but it makes sense. Like they were there. This LSD became a thing. There was a community. They were able to play music to accompany this trip. And of course, back then, there wasn't Spotify or YouTube or streaming on demand, right? So you had to have records. You had to have special tapes. I'm sure it was really hard to get recording devices back then. And so to have any sort of recorded music of this stuff was hard to get. Maybe record companies controlled it. The technology isn't like now where I can just literally pull open a voice memo. I could record something. I could have it up on the internet in like 10 minutes and that's it. Like I've released a song, right? So anyone can do that now. Back then it was like a big deal to like get a recording studio. And then how do you distribute it? They had to like physically burn records, right? However that is, etched, right? They had to etch records. So how did this happen? Even tapes, you have to like copy one tape at a time. Back then people had these, the tapes would copy one tape at a time. So it's like, it's just quite interesting how the time period is so important. You obviously, and that's important. And that's something I always do. You can't apply today's standards onto the past. And I really don't like when people do that. And they go, oh, we have to cancel so and so and so because they did this back then. And that is wrong now. It's like, well, yes, but how things were then, it wasn't wrong then. So we can't go from the future with what we know now and what our societal standards are now and then go and judge a past culture, right? So I don't, and I totally, that's my worldview. It's like you can't go back to the past and shun people who are no longer alive because of things that they did that were societally totally accepted and believed to be true, right? And now we have a different world. So that's part of that. So I just want you guys to know, I do really think deeply about this stuff. You guys have gotten me thinking about things I haven't ever thought about. And that is something I really value because I enjoy the intellectual exercise and I enjoy kind of the challenge to my own epistemology. That's a word I had to learn in grad school, which I am currently in grad school. I actually want to point out that a lot of this channel is just a big procrastination on my master's thesis because I am in my third and final year of a master's in vocal pedagogy from a university in the United Kingdom. And I'm supposed to be doing research right now and creating content that is specific to a research project about something teaching singing related. And I've done a little bit towards that, but I'm more focused now on jam bands. And maybe this can become my master's thesis in a way, but it's definitely something I like thinking about. I love learning. That's why I went back to school, even at my old age, So yeah, it's interesting. And I know some of you think I'm young, which I appreciate because I'm 39, woo. But I had the experience recently where I was hanging out somewhere and I met this girl who was like only 19 and I was like, yeah, I'm in grad school. And she goes, oh, my mom went back to school when she was older too. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I am older. You know what I mean? Like you just like forget. I'm like, oh, I feel so young though. I'm like, what do you mean? I just didn't get to do grad school when I was 22. So it's like, it's fine. But yeah, these are things I think about. I really do love music history. I did study music history. I'd be happy to lecture you guys on music history if you care. But yeah, I mean, look, for a lot of people, classical music is completely inaccessible. And one of my students who I help, some of my students already write music and stuff like that. And they're kind of set in their genre. And I'm like, you should really learn about what's already been done and like other stuff and concluding and not limited to classical music. It's like, oh, but classical music is so boring. I just don't get it. And I hate film scoring. I hate film soundtracks, da, 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 da. And I'm like, you just got to know what to listen for. You just got to understand the importance of it, right? So anyway, I appreciate you who are all the experts helping me through this journey. And I thought this Chat GPT thing was kind of funny. And just so you know, I don't think like Chat GPT is necessarily right ever. Like I question Chat GPT a lot, and obviously it just learns from us. It learns from what we write on forums and just kind of summarizes it. Um, but one person in my comments was like, "Ugh, she pulled up Wikipedia. What a pinhead." And I'm like, dude, I understand that like Wikipedia is not a scholarly source. And I actually have access to academic libraries right now because I'm in grad school and I have a license to look up all like scholarly articles in academic libraries. But that being said, I don't have time to go through and look up every article and write a paper on the Grateful Dead. So I don't mind looking through like Wikipedia's summary as kind of a starting point, but it doesn't mean I believe everything. I don't take everything at face value, just like I don't take everything that ChatGPT said at face value. Anyway, I hope this was interesting. Love to hear your thoughts on if ChatGPT is mostly right or if I should consider other things. And let me just move myself centered because I'm done with the sharing screen. And yeah, thanks for being on the journey. And I hope I see you soon in a live stream. Please let me know what times work best. I am on the West Coast, so usually when I'm done with all my work for the day and I do have children. They're teenagers, so they don't really need much attention anymore. Usually at night, they're just like doing homework or they're on the phone with their friends or they're texting their friends, like playing video games. Like they're doing their own thing. So at that point, I'm like, okay, now's the time I can stream, right? Because in the afternoons, I'm often taking them to activities and I'm teaching my own students, usually in the after school time slots. So I have some time in the mornings when I'm not teaching fitness classes. So I kind of have like an interesting schedule. I don't work a 9 to 5. I mostly work solidly from like 3 to 6:30 Pacific. And I also have a fitness class or two every day, either in the morning or mid-morning or like lunchtime. So that's kind of my general schedule. And yeah, happy. And the live stream was so fun because I got to have live feedback and everyone in the chat was talking with each other and interacting. And I thought it was like a great community. So I really appreciate that all. And thank you. And I hope you have a great day. Bye. Subscribe. Drop a comment.